they did not pay the taxes, if they failed, listen to this carefully, if they failed to pay the taxes, the mansabdars were free to take away their women and children and sell in the slave trade. It was very rampant. So Shivarai wanted to show that I have arrived. Okay, a Hindu king has arrived. What does he do? He plans a coronation. So Aurangzeb was like, now when this coronation ceremony happened, it must have hit Aurangzeb really, really hard. Really, really hard. So it is that time he started demolition of the temples, in full swing. And he also thought of reinstating jizya tax, which was cancelled by Akbar.
Medha Bhaskaran gave us one of the blockbuster trilogies of TRS in recent times. This episode is a sequel to that trilogy. We talk more about the life and times of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj in this one. We've also highlighted the life and times of Aurangzeb in this one. The fourth one is another insightful look into one of the greatest rulers that Bharatvarsh has ever seen. For more episodes just like this, make sure you follow TRS on Spotify. Every episode is available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world because we're a Spotify exclusive. Beer Biceps' own meditation app, Level Supermind, is now live on the App Store and the Play Store. Make sure you download it from the link given down below. You'll earn yourself a week-long free trial. This one is another incredible episode with Medha Bhaskaran. Enjoy yourselves, especially you history buffs. Medha Bhaskaran ma'am, you're back on our show telling us about Shivarai and Aurangzeb and that epic phase of Indian history.
Yes.
How are you, ma'am?
I'm good, thank you.
How was the response on our past trilogy that we had done?
Overwhelming.
Okay.
Many young people connected with me. And yes, and they want to read my books. And thank you very much. I did not know the power of podcast then. Okay.
No, we're glad. As I told you outside, I think you're doing a huge job for Indian history. It's this kind of history that we're not taught in history textbooks. You know, the gruesome stuff, the gory stuff, the inspirational stuff. Why are we not taught about these things?
Because generally in the textbook, history is written in a very dry manner. This happened, this happened, this happened. So no reasons why that happened and what the people thought, why they did what they did.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
I think people have a nice viewpoint of what the world was like, what the Indian Empire was like at that point.
Yes.
And by Indian Empire, I mean the Mughal Empire primarily at that point.
Yes.
And parallelly, Shivarai has escaped from Agra. And from what I've understood about history, this pissed off Aurangzeb a lot.
Yes,
that he had escaped.
Did.
So Aurangzeb is a very key part of this episode because as you said in our first episode, in order to understand Shivarai better, you've got to understand Badshah Aurangzeb.
Yes.
So I'll let you take the story forward from whichever point you think is best.
Yeah. So after the escape, Aurangzeb sent thousands of horsemen in all the direction to capture any person or any group traveling with a small 9-year-old boy. Okay, but as all of us know, history, little Shambhu Raje was left behind at Mathura because Shivarai knew that Aurangzeb will be surely looking at father and son duo. Many were captured, many were sent to Agra, many were flogged, and anybody, no religion, it was not only Hindu father and son. There were Muslims, Christians, everybody was captured and sent to Agra for verification whether they are the same as they escaped.
But where was Shambhaji Maharaj?
He was left back in Mathura.
Okay.
Shambhaji Maharaj,
like
Shambhu Raje was left in Mathura. He was just 9 years old.
And he was protected.
He was left with the relatives of Moroji Pingle.
Okay.
in Mathura.
Okay.
And they were very protective for Shambhuraje. So, Shivrai was leaving behind a piece, I wouldn't even say piece of his heart. His entire heart he was leaving behind at Mathura. But he had to travel fast. So from Mathura, if you see the distance between Mathura to Pune, stone's throw, as the crow flies, it is more than 1,000 kilometers, 1,200, 1,300 kilometers. But those days there were no highways, na? You had to climb the mountains, you had to cross the rivers, and you needed papers to cross the rivers. No ferryman will take you unless you have those papers. They're like passports issued by the Mughal government. Nobody can cross the border. So it must have taken a long time. It must have been a tiring journey. So Shivrai must have thought that it is impossible to travel this fast without getting noticed along with 9-year-old Shambhuraje. So he was left at Mathura. So when Shivrai reached Rajgarh, he declared that Shambhuraje is dead. We have to do all his Kriya Karma. Why? Because then Aurangzeb will not search for Shambhuraje. So that's how it was happening. But what are the repercussions of this escape? Now Shivrai has escaped, he's safe in Raigad. Nobody can touch him. Later on, Shambhuraje escaped, also reached Raigad. That itself is an enthralling story. Now you know Ram Singh, who was Mirza Raje Jai Singh's son, who looked after Shivaji at Agra. This Ram Singh, after the escape of Shivaji, was sent to Assam to fight. It's like a kind of a punishment.
What was happening in Assam?
Assam, they were rebels, and then they were,
a home empire?
A home empire, yeah. And they were like those, they were tribes also, which I said, no, they were cannibalistic tribes, and they were cruel tribes. They could hack you to death. They were like jungle people. So it was always a punishment if you are sent on these frontiers by your Badshah. And this was a punishment to Ram Singh because Shivrai had escaped.
Just want to give a small piece of information here. The military personnel we've had on the show have always said that the Northeast was the most difficult place to go and fight. And they're saying that about the 90s and 2000s. So I can't imagine what it was 300 years ago.
It was a watery, marshy land all over.
My point of highlighting all these different aspects is that we have the Mughal Empire in the middle, in and around Delhi and that whole northern belt. And then under that, we've got the Maratha Empire. On the west, we've got the Sikhs. On the east, we've got the northeast. So I feel like Aurangzeb wasn't just kind of getting attacked by Shivrai. There was a lot of people's eyes on Aurangzeb and lots of people wanted to kill him.
Yes, so Tegh Bahadur Singh actually fought for the Mughals in the beginning along with Ram Singh in Assam. But he was of a thought, he was a very strong person. He thought equality and justice are the most important, more than anybody's religion. Equality and justice are the most important things for humans. Okay. So when he came back from Assam in the early 70s, now this history is repeating. A lot of Pandits from Kashmir came and met him. And they said, is it impossible for us to live in Kashmir because the people, Aurangzeb's people are torturing us, they are killing us, and they are forcing us to convert. When he heard this, he changed his mind and he went against Aurangzeb. And revolt happened. That revolt, Aurangzeb really cracked down on that revolt. Tegh Bahadur Singh was captured in 1675 or 1674 or 75, April I think, he was brought to Chandni Chowk. And there were his 7 or 8 of his loyal people in front of him. Aurangzeb ordered to kill them. And one, they say, was thrown into a boiling oil in front of Tegh Bahadur so that he changes his mind. They asked him to convert. He refused. And then he was hacked to death, limb by limb. And this is known, Guru Gobind Singh, his son, escaped this, and then he was so fired by his father's sacrifice that he started Khalsa. That every one person in a Sikh family will be devoted to army or a military person.
That's where I think the Sikhs actually became a warrior class.
They became a warrior class. See how one act of this, a butterfly effect of Aurangzeb's fanaticism and bigot. He was a bigot, and his fanaticism. This is the result of that.
They say that he was the last powerful Mughal emperor because he didn't have any powerful or capable successors. So, do you think that because he was being attacked from all directions, he didn't get time to groom his successors? Is that why there was a downfall?
Not groom his successor. He suspected his children of ousting him. He ill-treated his children. See, there are 5 children. One Nabab Bai, there was a Hindu queen. She had 2 sons. One was Muhammad Sultan and second was Muazzam. Then there was Dilras Banu, his queen consort. She was a Persian. Okay, she had 2 sons. One was Akbar, not the Akbar emperor, Akbar and Azam and Akbar. And then he had married a concubine of Dara Shikoh, and he had one son from her known as Kambaksh. Now this Muhammad Sultan, in the war of succession, Muhammad Sultan, Aurangzeb's eldest son, helped his uncle Shah Shuja in Bengal. That is why Muhammad Sultan was caught by Aurangzeb, imprisoned at Gwalior Fort, and there, at the age of 36, he died of depression.
Why wasn't he killed?
Maybe it was his son. He did because Nabab Bai, the Kashmiri Pandit's daughter, Kashmiri king's daughter, Hindu king's daughter, she created a ruckus. So, those days you can't take photo, click and send on WhatsApp, look, your son is alive. Those days what they used to do, Nabab Bai would send a line drawing illustrator. He will go to the prison, make Muhammad Sultan as a model, and he will draw Muhammad Sultan and bring that picture back to his mother.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like that those days. There's no WhatsApp, no nothing, no camera. So though that type. So Nabab Bai was very particular that Aurangzeb does not kill her son.
Did the queen really have say against a Mughal emperor?
They had some hold,
Okay.
See, like husband-wife. Some hold wife will have on husband. Some. So Nabab Bai really fought. But I will tell you a very interesting story about Akbar, Dilras Banu's second son, Azam and Akbar. They had 3 daughters also. They were older. So, Zinatin Nisa, Zebun Nisa, you must have heard, they were poets and they were very talented girls. So, this Akbar and Shambhu Raje, they are born in 1657. They both lost their mother early in life. Like Akbar lost his mother when Dilras Banu died when he was just 2-3 months old. And Shambhu Raje lost his mother Sai Rani Sahib when he was 2 years old. They both left their father for some reason, which we will come to that. In 1679, Akbar left Aurangzeb because he did not like the bigotry of Aurangzeb. And at the same time, Shambhu Raje left and went to the Mughal. At the same time, Akbar left and came to the Marathas.
Damn.
You see, it's a similar times, and then the story goes there. It's a very interesting story later. So I find these 2 princesses had a lot in common.
The one thing I've got to know after these conversations with you is that Hindus and Muslims were on both sides of the battle. Like, it wasn't like all the Muslims were on one side and all the Hindus were on one side. It was just mixed at that time.
No, but in what has happened in the Mughal regime or when the Islamic invaders invaded us, and we could have fought them. Like they say, very few British ruled us, and if we would have spat, each of the Hindu would have spat the Britishers would have gone in a flood. They would have disappeared in the flood of that spit. So we were so powerful, but we were not united. So they came and ruled us. But here, according to their politics and their policies, Hindus should walk with their head down. There were many rules for Hindus. They cannot ride a horse. They cannot sit on an elephant in certain areas. They will have to pay heavy taxes, 60-70% of their income. If you convert, then you only pay, say, 10 to 15% of your taxes. So, and the schools were closed by Aurangzeb later on. No Hindu schools should run. Temples were broken. And then, and jizya tax humiliated them further.
But my point was that there was Hindus even on the Mughal side and there were Muslims even on the Hindu side.
Of course, there were Rajput kings in the Mughal side, right?
But what about the Maratha side?
Not many.
Not many Muslims?
Not many Muslims.
Okay.
Not many Muslims. There were few. There were few, especially in the Navy. There were few. I can't say no. But in Shivrai's regime, in his little kingdom, there was no discrimination between Hindu and Muslim. Just because you are a Muslim, you will get less paid. It was not like that. It was equal. You know. But here in the Islamic empires and the sultanates, automatically, especially in the empire, the Mughal empire, the Hindus had to pay very heavy duty taxes, you know. And then if they did not pay the taxes, if they failed, listen to this carefully, if they failed to pay the taxes, the mansabdars were free to take away their women and children and sell in the slave trade. It was very rampant.
What was the slave trade at that point? Like, who did the, say, mansabdars sell to? Households?
No, they could sell them to household. They will sell them to slave traders. They can be sent to other countries, or mansabdars would keep the women for themselves. The boys might have made eunuchs by a very crude operation, and they were sold for the protection of the harems. Even the mansabdars had harems. You know, so the slave trade flourished. This is there is a Dutch traveler, I think, Francois Pelsert. He arrived in India in 1618. Of course, he did not know Persian, but whatever he observed, he has written down in a book called Jahangir's India. He has seen that women and children have been sold, taken away by the mansabdars and sold for not jizya tax. I'm talking about also that kharaj tax, you know. And it was happening from Akbar's time and even before him, kharaj tax. That was never demolished. Okay. And even when they say Akbar demolished jizya tax, it was not completely gone. It was happening. And those mansabdars who did it were kind of not punished. They were not punished. So imagine what life was there. And then when Shivrai took over one fort after another, and what they did, Shivrai did, he also went into Konkan and established, see, he is the only person I feel, I don't know in history now, who did not have a coast. His Jagir or his little Swaraj, when he said, it did not have a coastal line, but he dreamt of navy. What is the basic requirement for a navy? A coast. That itself he did not have. So he had to acquire the coast. The west coast, like Konkan, the strip, narrow strip that goes from Mumbai till Goa, that was majorly controlled by Adil Shahi. So what he did in this peace period, after he came back and escaped from Agra, he tried to establish his rule in Konkan. Okay. He knew his limitations. What is the most important quality of a statesman? That the statesman must know his or her limitations, how much they can push. He knew, Shivrai knew that he does not have enough strength because he was left now. Afterwards, he took over other forts also, which were lost in Purandar Peace Treaty. He knew that he cannot push on the eastern side, because when he pushes on the eastern or northern side of his Swaraj, he will face the Mughal. Eastern side of his Swaraj, he will face Adil Shahi. And where he will have to fight pitched battles against their heavy-duty cavalry. And their heavy-duty cavalry is very strong on the plains. But that was not the case in Konkan. Konkan is a very rough land. You know, there are straight rock faces. And then in Konkan itself, hundreds and hundreds of rivers come from the mountains and join the sea. So that entire area is very difficult to move. So he concentrated on Konkan. He had to get the coastal part. He had to acquire ports. He had to start building sea forts. It is not just building ships. Where will he anchor his ships?
So what happened then?
So he started building. He had already finished building Sindhudurg, because Siddhis, this Sindhudurg is answer to Siddhis who were holed up in Janjira. So the Janjira fort, they had made it very strong. 2,000 Siddhis, the absolute mercenaries and pirates, were holed up in that Janjira fort.
These are of African origins?
Yes, Abyssinian origin.
Abyssinian. Are these the same Siddhis we find in Gujarat today?
Mostly, yes. They're the same. Siddhi is Sir, actually. Sir. These are from the East African countries.
Got it.
So, you want to know a little story about this Siddhis? Very interesting.
Sure.
So, this story goes like this. 100 or 200 years ago, before this happened, there was Koli community on this Janjira fort. It was a small wooden fort. So, these Siddhis had come in the ship. Okay. And then what they did, they hid in the barrels of liquor. And then a few Siddhis came forward and befriended. They got friends with Kolis. And they drank and they danced all through the night. And when the Kolis were drunk, all the Siddhis came out like a Trojan horse. They came out from the drums and killed the entire Koli community. And they acquired that Janjira. And then they built it. There are, I think, 30 bastions and so many cannon mounted on the bastion. It's like a real huge fort. And
have you been to the fort in Sewri? It's in Mumbai.
No.
Even that's a Siddhi fort.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's a smart, smaller Siddhi fort.
Yeah, I have to go.
It's near where I grew up, Wadala.
Really?
And when you go there, it's like this black stone fort. We actually shot a bunch of videos there. My videographers used to refuse to stay there after dark.
Oh.
Because it was just so
Creepy.
I mean, any fort is creepy, right? It's already seen so much death. Any fort in all over India.
It has a very dark history, you know. So
like no matter what fort it is, it has seen a lot of death.
Yes, it has seen.
Would you argue that it's probably some of the most like...
Yes, it is. Every fort has its tragic story and the happy story and the win story and the lost story.
But even the happy story has followed death. First death has come in order to become a happy story.
See, that is that's life, you know.
Yeah. Anyway, ma'am, go on. Sorry.
So Shivrai has started building these forts and the sea fort he first acquired, and he started shipbuilding activities. And then he had taken over the Mughal forts. Now it was time to show that I have arrived. So what does, he was not officially a king. He was still referred as a Bhumaiya, Jagirdar, by Aurangzeb and the likes of Shahs, the Sultanate kings. So Shivrai wanted to show that I have arrived. Okay, a Hindu king has arrived. What does he do? He plans a coronation. It happened in 1674. So where does he has now shifted from Rajgarh to Fort Raigad. Why Raigad? It is at the edge of Jauli, a valley of Jauli, where Fort Pratapgarh is also situated in Jauli Valley, which was taken over by Shivrai from the Mauryads, which we had discussed.
Yeah.
So he wants to make it grand. and no Hindu king had recently coronated himself. So they had to invent the rituals and rites of the coronation. They had to search for the shlokas. And there was a Brahmin called Gaga Bhatt, who was Shivrai's family. They had family connections, and he was from Maharashtra, but he has settled in Varanasi, Kashi. So he comes there. He invents all the rituals. He studies the old scriptures, and he creates a ceremony. And there are emblems of power. That only it was a prerogative of a Badshah, Mughal Badshah to use. What are the emblems of power? Like a fish head, a small fish head, which means the weak that need to be protected. A big fish head with teeth, that is the symbol of invaders. Then there are many like swastika. The symbol of swastika, that is Suvastu, which is actually a blueprint of a fort. So there are many emblems, and no Shah, the Sultanate Shahs could not use those emblems. This was the prerogative of Aurangzeb. But Shivrai used those emblems, created those emblems, and used them in his coronation ceremony. Okay. This entire thing is written by Henry Oxenden. Actually, my book starts from Henry Oxenden, who was a British officer based in Mumbai then. So he was invited for the coronation. They carried the presents, then they went to Raigad, then they went to top, and then they stayed there. Raigad is it has a huge kilometers long flat table on the mountain of Rairi.
What was happening in Mumbai at that time?
Mumbai, the British were ruling. Mumbai was the bastion of the English people, the apolitical so-called. They had fortresses built, and they were trading. Okay, they were also helping Siddhis. Now, what had happened on the coastal, there is Danda Rajapuri, that area in Konkan. All the Marathas were, they're very vigilant in that area. So, there is, I think, a kilometer of distance between the fort of Janjira and the coast, mainland, what you can call. So, they could not anchor their ships near the mainland because of the Marathas. The Siddhis could not do that. So, they had literally forced the British that they will come to Mumbai and park their boats there. And the British had allowed it for some reason. Otherwise, the Siddhis would have troubled them also. But what these Siddhis used to do, they used to anchor their ships near Mumbai and come to the mainland and trouble the Marathas. And take their women and children for slave trade, take their produce. So this was becoming a big problem in the Konkan area for Shivrai. So this is one. And even Mughal were depending on the Siddhis and the Portuguese. Because the ships sailing to Makkah were guarded by the Siddhis and given by the Portuguese or given by the Siddhis. So they were kind of very kind and nice to these Siddhis. They had, if they take the women and children from the coast, what can we do? That was their attitude. Okay. So Aurangzeb was like, now when this coronation ceremony happened, it must have hit Aurangzeb really, really hard. Really, really hard. So it is, that time he started demolition of the temples, in full swing. And he also thought of reinstating jizya tax, which was cancelled by Akbar, the Emperor Akbar. I'm not talking about his son Akbar. Okay. So Shivrai knew that if and there were a lot of liberal Muslims also were killed by Aurangzeb. He just couldn't stand them. There was a guy called Nanga Fakir who had hailed from Armenia. He was a Jew and knew Hebrew very well. He's a scholar of Hebrew. He had converted a Bible, Hebrew Bible, into Farsi. Then he had turned into Sufi. Then he wanted to study Hinduism, and he was studying Upanishads. but he never used to wear any clothes. And he said that Islam must be reformed. It must be liberated from its shackles. And thousands of liberals were following him in that. But Aurangzeb could not stand him. He caught this, Samrat, his name. I think Dargah is still there somewhere in Old Delhi. He was brought to the Darbar, and he was asked, why do you say only half the kalma? Why don't you say the full kalma that says, Muhammad is the last Paigambar? This is not my perception of Islam. This is not my theory of Islam. It is what Samrat said. Samrat said that nobody can be the last Paigambar. The religion needs to evolve. And I may be the last Paigambar. I am the scholar of Islamic scriptures. I have read Quran 100 times. So I can reform it. Every religion needs to change with the changing world. So Aurangzeb asked him, why did you... Then he did not know what to say, Aurangzeb. So he went into another line. He said, you kissed and hugged your disciple, Hindu disciple, in public. What was that relationship? So you know what he was implying. And on the basis of that relationship, perception of Aurangzeb or convenience of other mullahs, Samrat was hanged till death at Chandani Chowk.
He accused him of homosexuality.
Yes.
What was the case for homosexuality back then?
It's absolutely no in those days. But of course, what was happening in the harems, what was happening with the eunuchs, little boys, we do not know. But openly, this was a big no-no. Okay, openly. Its entire thing is based on hypocrisy. Entire. You know how some eunuch boys were used as sex slaves also. One of the Mansabdars, Aurangzeb's Mansabdars had, or Akbar's Mansabdars had 15,000 eunuch boys in his harem. And what were they used for? I don't know. I can just guess, So this Samrat, so Shivrai knew if and when Aurangzeb descends in south, then we will have to pay heavy taxes, my Rayat will die, my people will die, and it's going to be a life worth committing suicide.
I mean, it's not even the battles, just waking up every day knowing that there's some new issue that's happened. I was telling my family that, even just running business is so glamorous when you think about it before you've started.
No.
And then every day there's a mental health battle if you're running a business.
Correct.
And here we aren't talking about a business, we're talking about an empire.
Empire, yeah.
Where there is death involved, there's torture involved, there are very brutal enemies, there are multiple different enemies who've banded together, and you have to ensure that your people are happy and the economy is growing. So it mustn't have been an easy life. And somewhere it has to have taken a toll.
Yes. And also, I will, my entire book is based on few lines which I have written myself. It is like this. Now we say ahimsa. I don't believe in that. Because this poem goes like this, written by me. When peace demands suffering and shame, war remains the only option that is most humane. You have to fight to keep your people safe and at peace.
What is said about his demise, Shivaji Maharaj?
What happened that time? It is written in Dr. Kamla Gokhale's book also. What has happened now? Imagine, and I am also a woman. So I understand that history part, I think better than men may, because I am a mother.
Yeah.
I want my son to be at the center of power. I don't want my son of my Shivrai's other wife. Okay. So what people say, there is a conspiracy now. Look, Shivrai comes to Raigad. He is all the time campaigning. From some campaign he comes and he falls ill. So now the situation is like this. Shivrai is at Raigad. He's ill and almost dying. He doesn't know he's dying.
Why?
How much will nobody knows, that you are going to just die after a short illness. So the Raj Vaidya and all are invited. That time on that, the ministers have already arrived one by one. There is this Pradhan Moroji Pingle, then Surnis, who is a tax collector, revenue minister, Annaji Datto. Then there is Hiroji Farzad, the man who impersonated Shivrai and saved his life at Agra. Then there is Soira Rani. Then there is Putala Rani. They say Putala Rani was at Pachad, but I feel she must have come to Raigad that time. I'm not sure. Okay, they were all there. Now, Shivrai is sick and we do not know what conversation happened between there. We don't know. But Bakhar's right. They write that he said this, he said that, and it sounds very exaggerated. Anybody who is so ill cannot talk such long paragraphs and paragraphs, you see, according to me. And according to the English correspondence, he vomited blood. Okay. So we do not know what disease, what that peptic ulcer burst, or we have no idea. Or there was gallstone problem, we don't know anything. Or typhoid. So he just dies there. Where now the situation is, look, Shambhu Raje is at Panhala. Okay, he's there, Panhala. He's come back from the Mughal and he's at Panhala. Here, there are his two queens, basically. Even another Sakwar queen is also there. But was this Sakwar Bai Sahib, was she at Jinji? I'm not sure. Because one of her daughters were at Jinji. So I'm not really sure.
Whose queen was she?
This Shivrai has 4 queens or 5 queens that time alive.
Okay.
But main queens were Soira Rani Sahib and Putala Rani Sahib. Those were there at the fort.
Why don't we hear about the other children that Shivrai had?
Only boys, no? That time importance of boys. So Soira Rani Sahib had a boy. That's why she is so important in that. And Saibai Sahib, who had Sambhaji, Shambhu Raje, she's already dead. And Soira Rani Sahib is a queen consort during the coronation. So she is very important. So the situation is like this. Then what the ministers, many people say that Soira Rani Sahib was completely innocent and was twisted by the ministers. Ministers who? Annaji Datto, his brother Somaji Datto, and Balaji Auji, the script, the ones who write all the letters for Shivrai, and then Morupan Pingle, they instigated Soira Rani. She was very bhola, very innocent, and the entire thing was twisted by the ministers. But according to research books, my research based on these books, Soira Rani was also involved, and she very much wanted her son to become the next
emperor,
next Chhatrapati. So what they do? What do? They close all the gates. She orders the closure of all the gates, incoming and outgoing crowd from Raigad, so that the news of Raja's death does not travel outside and does not reach Sambhaji's ears. Now, what they plan is to quickly do not Manchaka Rohan, not Rajabhishek. Manchaka Rohan is little different. The Sinhasan or the throne cannot be kept empty after a long time after the king is dead. So, king is dead and long live the king. Immediately somebody has to sit on that throne. So that is known as Manchaka Rohan. It's not a full-fledged coronation. So quickly that coronation has to take place. And I feel that the ministers and Soira Rani Sahib both were equally responsible. See, what would have happened? These people were not some cunning, planning, useless guys. Annaji Datto and Morupan Pingle, they were the two wheels of the Swaraj, which Shivrai created. They were great men. Okay. And if Annaji Datto had not started a new way of collecting revenue, they could not have every full moon day salaries of 40,000 cavalrymen, 40,000 infantrymen, the fort Shibandi, the fort defense, then civil servants had to be paid. That Shet Sara had to be collected, and very wisely collected. And no force should have. Shivarai never wanted force to be applied on the farmers or the cultivators. So all this was managed by Annaji Datto. Okay, and Moropan Pingle was not just they were all warriors. Annaji Datto took over Panhala along with Kondaji, another Maratha.
So what happened?
So the thing is, Hambir Rao Mohite, who is supposed to be Soyra Rani's brother, he gets the wind of what's happening around because he had to be told. He controls the army, but what he sees there is the Praja, which is also written in the reference book. The Praja is the subjects, are extremely attached to Shambhuraje. Not only he resembles the king, the Shivrai, but he also is very good to them. He's very good to them. So they all are for Shambhuraje. Then Hambir Rao Mohite at the last moment, how he changes colors, how he rescues Shambhuraje, and how Shambhuraje is made the next Chhatrapati is another story.
For the final part of this podcast, I have to take you back to Aurangzeb.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we did a trilogy the last time. It was actually a 4-part series.
Yeah.
And this is the 4th one. Just if you could give a brief outline of how did he die and what happened.
No, he died a very broken man in the Deccan in 1707. And where are we now? We are in 1680. Now we are in 1680. Aurangzeb died in 1707.
27 years later.
27 years of thrilling war.
And he was older than Shivrai.
He was older than Shivrai.
So he actually lived to be an old man.
I think up to 90 he lived.
Really?
90, yes. He lived up to 90.
And he was still the emperor till 90.
Yeah, the so-called emperor, because the entire Mughal system had broken down. He spent about that many years. He came to the Deccan in 81, 82. But before that, he was in Rajasthan, which is also very interesting. That story you have to say, I have to tell you that story. How he tried to hoodwink his own son Akbar. But when he comes to South, 27 years he remains there with the only dream of taking over Shivrai Swaraj, and he fails. He takes over Bijapur, he takes over Qutub Shahi and Adil Shahi, but he fails to take over the Maratha.
Because the system was that strong.
No, that system wasn't that strong because there was a fire of vengeance in the hearts of the Marathas after the tragic and brutal death of Shambhuraje.
He was tortured.
Yeah, so that will come, the next.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight about his death? Badshah Aurangzeb's death? I always had this question ever since I was growing up, and from the first time I heard of this story. What exactly happened to the successors?
See, Aurangzeb was very disheartened. He could never take over the Maratha kingdom. See, you can take over the forts, and then he was used to lose them ever so quickly. Because Rani Tarabai, the daughter-in-law of Shivrai, was an excellent warrior. She saw to it that she jumped from fort to fort and controlled the cavalry and Maratha cavalry and infantry. That was after her husband's death, Ram Raja. She is the one who really made the Mughal run for their money. And he died in the camp in Ahmednagar, where I was born, in the camp, Mughal camp, a frustrated old man whom people were making fun of from behind. Because see, all his Mansabdar and his warriors were also kept away from home 27 years. Can you imagine 27 years away from your home and you cannot see any winning this thing, and this senile old man is trying to, push them to the war. So he had a very pathetic death. Actually, I would like to end this episode with one of Aurangzeb's poems.
Sure.
Now you're talking about his death. Huh? Life is a twinkle, a breath. Now it was life, now it is death.
He wrote this himself? That's how he
In
looks at his
Persian.
own life? A
Yes,
twinkle?
a twinkle. And he wrote, it was only what he did all his life. Will Allah forgive him? He doesn't know.
He had guilt.
Yes, full of guilt when he died. Full of guilt. And all his sons turned. They started war of succession when he was on his deathbed.
Who won it?
Shah Alam, Muazzam,
Muazzam, who was Sambhaji Raje's friend, technically.
So what? Not friend, you won't call it, but they kind of, because they must have met at Aurangabad, no? And he must have treated Shambhuraje with respect. Otherwise, Shambhuraje went there 2-3 times.
What was his story as an emperor, Muazzam's? Because he inherited a very attacked kingdom.
He was a very weak emperor, Later on, after Aurangzeb, there was no strong emperor. Later on. The last Mughals, sort of.
Like the Maratha Empire started growing after that point.
Yes.
And they started taking back
Yes.
parts of the territory.
Sort of. Not now. It took another 30-40 years for, then the Peshwas came in the picture. So all that is another story.
Yeah. What about the Sikh Empire this time?
Sikh Empire this is what I know about this period.
Sure.
What happened later, I'm not so sure. But Chhatrasal Bundela, who had Bundelkhand, he had come to meet Shivrai and he wanted to fight against Aurangzeb and he wanted to join Shivrai. So Shivrai said, you fight from your land. And Bundelkhand little kingdom was again reinstated by this Chhatrasal Bundela with the guidance of Shivrai.
Oh.
So people were rising against this Islamic torture that time.
I would have asked you that how do you look at the long-term impact of Shivrai on not just the Maratha Empire but on the history of India in general?
As far as I'm concerned, I'm a free woman. I can do what I want. I can learn, go to any college. I can study and I can travel to any city in this part of the world. And I will not be a second wife to anybody. I would rather stay single. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a free woman. Freedom.
Yeah.
I got that freedom is thanks to Shivrai.
Medha Bhaskaran, ma'am, thank you. I thought that we have ended our trilogy, but clearly not. This was a very impactful fourth one. So thank you. So that was the episode for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what other aspects of history you'd like to learn from TRS. We intend on covering the Gupta Empire, the Chola Empire in future series just like this. Until then, guys, remember to follow us on Spotify. Every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. Download Level Supermind as well. Ranveer and the team will be back soon, bringing another stellar episode of TRS just for you.